Welcome back to the channel, y'all. Here with something a little different. It was based on motors. A lot of you guys maybe will look down on this, but I know you guys don't all throw away your burnt out motors. So with that said, what do you do with your burnt out motors? Do you literally put them in the trash can and say bye-bye? Do you repair them? Do you just put them in a corner and collect them and say, hey, this is a motor I raced, you put a piece of tape on it and you say, this is a motor I raced at this date, I won this tournament with, or like, what do you guys do with your motors? Especially the burnt out ones, and that is what this video is about. I have here about 11 burnt out motors, meaning that's a good amount of motors that can be used as test motors in my brain. I obviously won't be using these for competition, especially going to Japan or Italy. Most places don't even accept cracked open motors, and they check really tediously. So me knowing this, I don't play around like that. I'll always buy new motors for a competition I'm going to, break it in and go there and kick some butt. We're trying to keep it PG here, you know. Anyways, but yeah, I would love to get, your feedback on what do you do with your burnt out motors? Because in my mind, go out and buy yourself a baggie of these, which y'all already know are brushes. They're the piece that sticks out of the motor here that makes the connection for the motor to spin. This video is for testing you only, okay? If you're just looking to crack motors open to repair the brush so you could then have a nice case of motors or stash of motors that could be whatever, Mach Dash, Hyper Dash, a torque tuned, whatever motor, you could replace the brushes. And then you'll have your own nice little stash of motors that will be considered your test motors. And then you have your own little stash of motors that will be considered your race motors that are not cracked open. In my opinion, this is a very big go-to thing to have if you're so deep into this and you're into testing and competition. Okay, y'all, this is what we got here at the moment. These are all the motors that are so-called burnt out. Some of them definitely do look abused, like this one. Honestly, that's the only one. This one and this one kind of have the stickers peeling away, but most of them look like this. Really good condition, almost like they just came out of the package. So why throw it away? In the end of the day, you could replace the brush and break in the motor, mark it as a test motor, and you got yourself a batch of motors that you could go and run your cars worry-free, that you're gonna get almost close to the same results as you would with the motor you're gonna be racing with. So here we have two brushes. You see this pack of brushes is all new. And yes, from AliExpress. very inexpensive, super cheap. This is like the smallest bundle pack I think you can get off AliExpress. They sell like so many together, but I got this small bundle pack. I wanted to just test and see if they were even going to be close to the same. I'm going to zoom in for you guys to show you how similar. I think you saw in the previous pictures I took, but I want to show you in video how similar these brushes on these motors, especially the carbon brushes, are to the original Japan brush. So just in case you guys don't understand what I'm talking about, the locks, these are the locks here. There's one on each side, and once you open those locks, they say you are, because you're dismantling the motor, it's no use anymore for Japan Cup rules, because they think you're tampering and modifying the motor. Anyways, we're not. We're just replacing the brushes that are burnt with pretty much exactly the same brush, so we can have a batch of test motors. But these are the locks you gotta undo, and that is why I was saying a really thin-headed screwdriver is gonna do you some justice. I have not cracked this one open yet. I just wanted to confirm with you guys if you understood what locks I was talking about. So we're gonna go forward with actually cracking this guy open so I could show you the inside of these motors. Okay, we're back. We got those locks undone, and make sure when you're undoing these locks to be careful to not stab yourself like me, because they are pressed in there pretty good. They don't want you to open these, obviously, and so when they press them down, they really make sure they're snug. But when you get them nice and straight, this top cap here, you can already see it will come off very easy. You just wiggle, 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 wiggle. Okay, we're back, and the reason I say to have two screwdrivers, one with a little bit of a fatter head than another, is because the skinny head one will be the one you start with to pry up the two tabs to get them kind of elevated away from the plastic. And then once you get them elevated away from the plastic, to fully get those tabs nicely flat. So you can see now, even this one's still not nicely flat, but this one is, and it's close to it, so I think it's gonna come off. But to get them pretty flat, you gotta have then a little bit of a fatter head, of a flat head, to get them finagled into the position you need. So let's see if we get this cap off with one hand. Pretty awesome. There you go. I highly recommend you don't do that, but I wanted to show you me popping this off. So before we get to what's inside these motors, what we are replacing in these motors is obviously the brush. And where did that brush go? Here it is. These two This is an AliExpress one that we will be replacing. This is the one that I replaced from the other motor, so we put that away. And these are the brushes. This is the brush that was in this motor. You could see that it's still in relatively good condition, but for some odd reason it doesn't like to stay steady, the RPMs. So and on top it's crunchy even if you put oil and clean it and blah blah blah. So we replacing it. It looks pretty worn down, to be honest, that brush. Yeah, so you can see the comparison between the carbon brushes of how they in a sense come and how worn out that son of a gun is. But that is why it's a blessing to be able to replace these and have an option to buy a little baggie of them. I'm going to pull apart what's inside this motor now to show you, and it's not much that is in here, but when you're pulling these brushes off, make sure to leave this spacer in here. It's a little spacer up top. You can see it kind of wants to come out, and on some motors it comes out very easy. Make sure you leave that spacer in there. It keeps the shaft from flopping back and forth. And also when you have this, okay, there you go. There you go. You see now, that spacer, a lot of people end up pulling out and using for different reasons for open class. But we are not using it for any other reason than for its motor. So you leave that spacer in there and make sure it stays in there. Now, regarding the copper I was telling you about, this piece right here, you see that it is worn down. It has some metal flakes around it. It looks a little crusty, it looks a little chunky. You could clean it up. Just take a piece of paper towel. I would say take the whole motor apart, clean it, get all the gunk out of it. And then with this, I just cleaned it with a napkin and called it a day. But if it looks really crunchy and crusty, take something very fine and go for one round, one pass, and that'll be enough. Because it's copper, it gets worn down or smoothened out, I would say. It can get smoothened out real easy. And it goes the same thing for if you use too thick or too harsh of sandpaper, you could leave lines in there, and you don't want to leave lines on that copper. So I'm gonna pop this out and I'll show you the rest of the motor. Maybe I could get it out with one hand. It's not that strong of magnets. Maybe not. I'm not that much of a G. Okay, be right back. All right, no more dirty fingers. Sorry for all that nastiness, but you know, it's part of the game. So here we have a couple pieces. We have the top cap. This is called the armature. And this is the canister. Inside your canister, you have two magnets that are opposite of polarity. And what holds those magnets in is this little U metal piece. This armature, a lot of people take these off, this copper piece at the bottom, and use it for spacing on open class, or they'll use it for other means for open class. But when it's on here, if you're starting to have issue with your motor going back and forth, and you're already in the process of, let's say, replacing the brush like we're doing, and you don't want your motor to have so much play, you could mess with these and make sure they're still in here for one, or you'll sometimes see this guy smashed up all the way to here. And that's just because some people, when they're putting the pinion gear on, or the motor just took a lot of abuse and heat, this sometimes slides down. Sometimes these, after so much heat, they become worn out and become actually super easy to take on and off. These are actually relatively good because this motor's, it was only used for I think a couple months before the brush burnt out. So might have been a bad braking process, who knows, maybe bad oil. But you could see that it did get hot, overly hot at one point, because it has these like you could say hot spots. It's not like yellow or copper color all the way through. You have these hot spots. So honestly, I'm not going to even clean it up. I'm just going to wipe it down. I'm going to wipe all of this down. Inside the cap, it gets all nasty. This is actually really good because, again, this is a pretty new motor. Inside the canister, like I said, you need to clean it up also. You see the magnets get gunked up with oil. And that also prevents you from getting your power out of the motor. Replacing these, and that's what you're looking for, because we just want a good batch of test motors. And thankfully, you're able to get these small little components to be able to take it apart like this and get it running as it came from Tamiya, or came out of the package. You have very few things here to worry about, honestly, when you're taking these motors apart. Not much needs to be checked or replaced. This only needs to be replaced. Copper needs to be checked. Copper needs to be checked. Spacer up top needs to be checked. I would say also check your copper pieces at the top of your cap. And also, sometimes if you do end up running these motors till they fully die, these copper ends here, they're just bushings. So they're not bearings, they're not anything fancy, they're just bushings. So sometimes those will go bad, and that will allow not up and down play, but actual side to side play, and you'll get really bad vibrations. And then, in my opinion, that is when you fully replace the motor. You don't even try to change that little copper piece out, because believe me, I've tried. You damage the canister first of all, and it's not worth it. If that's bad, and then most likely this one will be bad, and then most likely it's a domino effect. Most likely if that goes bad, that means it heated up at one point a lot. That means the inside of the canister, which this is the inside still, and this is plastic, that means this probably warped, and the copper piece up top has gone bad. And then if it heated up to that point of damaging that, then it probably heated up to a point of damaging this piece up here, and most likely this would have been shifted down also. It's a whole domino effect of things that happen when you realize that this bottom piece is no bueno. So those are a few things you can check while you're in the process of replacing your brushes to make sure you have a good test motor. We're gonna pop in this brush, and I'm gonna show you how to do this the proper way, because if you do it another way, it just happens to crush the brush and it doesn't line up properly for when you go to break in the motor. So I'm gonna get to setting it up to a certain point before I actually assemble the whole thing, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so the whole time I was talking, I couldn't remember what this top copper piece was called, and it just popped in my head right as I was finishing the last clip. It's the commutator. It's what accepts all the voltage, transfers it to all this wire here, and then what polarity you get out of these magnets makes this bad boy spin to the RPMs that you end up breaking the motor in, which result in breaking in the motor is for these guys. So yes, this is, I just wanted to chime back in because I was naming pretty much everything on here other than what the heck this was. I kept pointing it out like just a copper piece, but no, it is a copper piece, but it has a special name for it. It's a commutator. But yeah, let me get to putting this brush in and slapping this bad boy together for y'all. So another step that I forgot to show you guys, it's kind of important. You see these lines? See, that line is pretty clean. Inside there you see a shininess because those lines are recessed, and well, as you can see on my finger, there's metal flakes all over the place from the previous brush and commutator being, you know, eradicated while spinning at high RPMs. You end up getting metal pieces or copper pieces from the commutator, and whatever carbon pieces you get, they all collect up in there. So take yourself a razor blade. Where's my razor blade? There it is. Take yourself a razor blade, something, you know, pointy, and when you have this top little spacer lifted up, or you don't even need to, honestly, just get yourself something pointy. I would suggest something like this. Get in there and be very gentle and get all that debris out of there so it looks like this one, nice and clean. All right, y'all, so we're back. We got all the components clean. I have the armature slid back into the canister. This isn't the old brush, so let's put that with the old brush. This is a new brush. Obviously, we already know which way the motor we want to put the brush. It has to be facing this way towards the decal. I was saying there's a certain way to put the brush in, which there is. You don't put it on here and then just pop it back in. You finagle it in first, like this, towards, let's see if I could do it with one hand. I might not be able to, so you just slowly finagle it in. All right, I couldn't get it with one hand, so we're back. You just slowly finagle it in, and you want it to be touching the commutator, like so. Well, not like that. And this is the little bit of the difficult part of doing this, is when you're putting the top cap on, you got to make sure these carbon pieces are actually touching the commutator. Otherwise, well, the motor won't run right at all. And as you see, it's not touching the carbon pieces at the moment because it slid out. So I'm gonna turn this camera back off and be right back. All right, so we're back. And this is what I mean by you want them touching a certain way. And these spacers up top, And that is the reason why I say to leave them, because it actually helps not just for spacing, but for preventative reasons of the brush popping kind of off this way when you're trying to put it on. It all works together. It's synchronized in a sense. So you can see that there is a little step down on the front of the brush for it to rest on the canister. So then you know you're also in the right position. And then this is when you just slowly take your time, and you take your top of the canister and pop it on. You line up that like this piece right here. Don't know what it's called. I don't even think it has a name, but this top cap has this piece here, and that is what I guess you could say centers the brush, and that's why the brush has that hole right there. So when you're sliding your top cap on, this shaft will go through this center hole, and then you have to make sure this shaft of the top cap, I guess you could say, the top cap shaft, we could call it that. Got to make sure this top cap shaft slides into the brush when it's properly seated the right way and push down, and you're all good to go. It'll be all back together, and that's when you could lock it. I definitely say put these back, lock them, because the motor runs honestly way smoother when it's locked than when it's unlocked. So we're gonna get back to putting this together. I'll be right back. Okay, so you see here, I have it close to being put back together. I just want to show you guys that this is what I mean. The shaft is now in, but you have the top cap shaft lined up with the brush. And when you're ready and you feel like everything is kosher and straight, lined up how you want, slowly get it in there, and the brush will be feeling a little tight. That's how it's supposed to on the sides. The shaft part that goes into the brush is supposed to go in nice and smooth. And then, like I said, when you're done and it's all back together, make sure you lock those two bad boys down, and you got yourself a pretty badass test motor. Last thing to do you're gonna have is the braking process. All right, so we're almost there. It's not fully seated, but you could see what I mean by that top cap shaft. It goes in there really easy and smooth. The brush square part is what gives you a little bit of an issue of getting it out and in. Even with the original Tamiya, it's just the way it's designed. It's supposed to be a little bit of a snug fit. All right, so everything's lined up, and the last to do is press down. And there you go. You got yourself a new brush and a new test motor that you could run without any worry of burning out and overthinking, being like, hey, I don't want to run my race motor, blah, blah, blah. So now you got yourself what could have been, or what was your race motor with a new brush, and now it's your test motor. So we're gonna get to locking this bad boy down, and the last piece of the, well, project would be to break in your motor. I use this setup because it is very direct, very easy. It's the Enomoto motor, I guess you could say, holder. And when I used the dual shaft, I put both of the propellers on there. They're supposed to act as like a turbines to cool it, or to keep it cool while it's running. So let's see if we could get this turned on. There you go. I'll show you how this goes. I'll do it for a minute. We'll do 1.2 volts, 1.3, 1.1, give me 1.2, there you go. And then once you turn it on, you got the impellers, or the propellers going, and that's your time left. That's the voltage you're running at. Very simplistic setup, but it gets the job done. I already pre-broken this motor yesterday. This is the one motor that I did out of all of these. So now I got 2 test motors that are gonna be good to go. And the rest of these need the same service. I just went through the process of showing you guys. Okay, y'all, so coming to the end of the video, this is just a little extra I wanted to add before we finalize the end. I actually got done with all the motors, and I changed out all the brushes of the Mach Dash and Hyper Dash motors, other than the 2 torque tune motors here, because I don't have the proper brushes for them. So I want to flip the camera around and show you guys on video. I'll take a couple pictures also of how these brushes look after so much abuse, and reason why in the end replacing these brushes to make these test motors is the best bet to have yourself a nice batch of high performance test motors that you could accumulate over time and use instead of your actual race motors. All right, so here we are with one that's still cracked open, and you could see that these are all fit and ready to go. This one that's cracked open we will go over first, because I thought it was very interesting when I looked at it, and the brush was fine, but the armature took a beating. So I'm gonna zoom in for you guys, and you can either do as you will, skip ahead if you don't want to listen to this or whatnot, but as you can see, the brush is perfectly fine. That's the brush that came out of this motor. The canister looks good. Even the magnets still have the paint on them. That means this motor was not used for very long at all. But the bell housing has all this grime and blah into it. I think this motor was ran dry for a good while, because when I looked at the armature, you could see how melted it got. None of the other ones were like this. And I'm talking about this plastic right here. So, in my opinion, this motor actually is done. Other than maybe you could use these, but the armature is pretty toast. And you could see that the brush is still in good shape. Maybe a little melted, maybe on the inside there. You can see it's kind of like, it's not white or clear, it's starting to be like fuzzy-ish. So maybe it did get some damage on here. But for these, none of the armatures did any of that weirdness of getting overheated and melted. So they're all in great standing. Reason why I put them back together. And I put the old brushes next to each individual motor, just to signify how bad they got or how good they stayed. So we're gonna go and start with the first one I did. You can see that the brush is still in all right condition, but it still was not running properly. So hopefully a new brush is going to do a job. This one, you can tell, pretty beat up. This one, it's even more crunchy and beat up. This one, not too bad. It has the curvature that you want on a brush to get full contact, but it wasn't doing the job. So yeah, replaced. Now this one took a real beating. If you can tell that this inner one is pretty much no longer there. So yeah, and I believe we go over. Yep, this one took a good beating also. It has kind of the curvature you want, but one side has more than the other, so I think that's why it wasn't staying steady RPM. Same with this one. You have more bread of you have more on this side than you do on this side. This one was toast. You can see there's nothing left. So we're on the last one, and this one was just super grimy, and the motor itself was just nasty as heck. I think I just never cleaned it, because most of these motors I used in backyard races, and I believe that's why this motor ended up taking such a beating and melting the armature the way it did. It was because probably I bought the motor while I was at the race, and I didn't break it in, because you could tell that this is not broken in at all. And I think I just threw it in the car with very little oil and decided to race with it that day. Don't know if that's the case or what, but all I got left are these two torque tune motors. And well, I believe they use a different brush. They don't use the ones with the carbon at the tip. So I'm gonna go and do a little research to find those brushes for there, and we're good to go. So we're gonna move on to the next clip and get this video finalized. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the video. It was gonna be just a short one since I just did a long previous video of that build, the Super Saiyan build, and if you haven't checked it out, please go back. It's just one video. It is long, it's about over an hour. Like I said, skimmed through it. Even if that's the case, it's an enjoyable video, it's an enjoyable build, and well, I appreciate you guys for tuning into this one. Thank you again for all the comments, questions, and just interest. In the end of the day, reason why I get to go and have motivation to come out again and do another video. So hopefully this one helped you guys as well, because it helped me figuring this out. I haven't had a batch of, you could say, test motors. I've just been using my race motors to test, and so sadly I don't run my cars as much as I want to. So this is why I made this video, is for people who have the opportunity to make themselves a batch of test motors, and they're like, well, I don't get to run my cars as much as I want to. Well, if you have a batch of bad motors with bad brushes, here you go. Just do this, mark them as test motors, break them in like you did before, and go have your fun, because I'm about to. I have a nice track, nice shop. Can't wait for the grand opening and have you guys here. So again, thank you for tuning in. We love you all, and catch you on the next one. Laters.